As you know, today's meeting is taking place by the teleconference, and that we are following the Centers for Disease Control recommendations regarding social distancing. We are conducting this meeting in order to limit gatherings to fewer than 10 individuals in an attempt to protect the health and safety of our college community. With these unique challenges of today's format in mind, I would like to offer a few guidelines that we can allow this meeting to run as smoothly as possible. If you would, again, place your devices on mute, and if you have not already, to reduce the feedback and the background noise. Please note that you will need to unmute and identify yourself prior to speaking. Additionally, during the reports to the board, we ask that the trustees hold their questions until the presentation is completed. If a trustee desires to ask a question, if you would please get my attention, I will certainly offer you the opportunity to explore the subject matter as much as you like. I will then recognize you for your questions. When we bring each proposed action item to the vote, we will again conduct a roll call so that each member's vote will be recorded individually. And again, we appreciate your understanding of these unusual circumstances. I might add that, as Laurie acknowledged, that and Dr. Hensley, that Trustee Gatewood is not here. As most of you know, Mr. Gatewood, his company is involved pretty heavily in the oil and gas industry, and if you were reading the papers this morning or listening to the news yesterday, I think he's got a lot on his plate this morning. He's pretty active involved in, I think they're already undergoing some restructuring in his company, so he's got some pretty serious issues, I think, to take care of. As required by state law, this meeting is open to the public, but by telephonic communications. The college is complying with the suspended proceedings of the Open Meetings Act in accordance with Section 418.016 of the Texas Government Code. Members of the public are entitled to participate and address the college through remote connections. We have been identified that there is no one who has signed up or is present to speak. The public access was at rooms 2 and 3 of the Blinn College District Student Center, located at 651 Blinn Boulevard, Brenham, Texas, via live stream link. There's been no public comment, persons registered for comment. So that brings us to call the meeting to order, and I would like to also reiterate that the Texas Government Code permits the board to meet in closed executive session following this for the following reasons: to consult with the college district's attorney or matters deemed privileged by the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct or Government Code 551.071, to deliberate regarding real property under 551.072, a prospective gift under 551.073, certain personnel matters under 551.074, security devices or security audits under 551.076, and economic development negotiations under 551.087. I will conclude by saying that there is no executive session planned for this meeting today. Let me now move forward to the invocation, and I'd ask Reverend Wells if you would ask a blessing on this gathering, if you would, Reverend Wells.
Good morning. Let us pray. Father God, in the name of Jesus Christ, we bow in your presence, and we thank you for the creative leadership in the midst of this crisis. We thank you for our chancellor and our students and our staff. We pray that you would give them endurance and dedication as they complete this spring semester. And we pray for this board of trustees that you would give us the wisdom to govern in excellence. God, we love you and we thank you. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, Randy. And I'd like to ask Trustee Blinn if you would to again lead us in the pledge to the American and Texas flags. Thank you, Teddy.
We'll start with the flag. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Texas flag. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you.
Thank you, Teddy. All right, and item 3, there is no public comment. That takes us to section 4, which is the reports. I'd like to ask Dr. Hensley if she would to give the Chancellor's administrative report. Dr. Hensley.
Thank you, Chair Mosher, and good morning, trustees. I'd like to begin with a brief COVID-19 update. As we announced last month, all spring semester classes have been converted to an online environment, and Blinn employees are working remotely through the conclusion of the spring semester. Additionally, Blinn has scheduled all May mini-mester, Summer 1, Summer 2, and Summer 10-week courses to take place in an online environment. As you know, trustees, the CARES Act provides federal funding to address the economic impact of COVID-19, and portions of the bill specifically address funding for higher education. Blinn is analyzing the requirements of the Act related to the use of these funds, and we will keep you updated regarding the developments. Now, to support its community during the coronavirus pandemic, Blinn's Natural and Physical Sciences, Health Sciences, and Technical and Community Education divisions recently donated personal protective equipment, sometimes referred to as PPE, to local hospitals and medical clinics. This donation was coordinated by Vice Chancellor for Student Services and Administration, Karen Buck, Dean of Health Sciences, Michelle Trubenstein, Dean of Natural and Physical Sciences, Dr. Elmer Godney, and Dean of Technical and Community Education, Jay Anderson. And Police Chief John Chancellor provided an officer to assist in the delivery of these supplies. Recently, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's latest figures show that Blinn continues to be the state's leading academic transfer institution. Blinn's 45.9% transfer rate once again was the highest in the state, followed by Northeast Lakeview College's 39.2%. The statewide average, trustees, was 24.1%. Again, Blinn's was 45.9%. I would particularly like to congratulate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Dr. Marcelo Basicki, and our entire academic leadership team, and particularly our faculty, for making this achievement possible. Now we have some new affordability data. The Coordinating Board also updated its affordability data at collegeforalltexans.com. And according to this site, out-of-district Blinn students taking 30 credit hours in 2020-21 will save $4,514, or 44% in tuition and fees, compared to in-state residents at the average Texas public university. Registration for our May mini-mester and the summer and fall terms are opened right now to current students. It opened on March the 30th, and it opened for all students on April the 8th. Another nice award for Blinn College. We recently were recognized as one of 2020's most promising places to work in community colleges by the National Institute for Staff and Organizational Development, commonly referred to as NISOD, and Diverse Issues in Higher Education. The Promising Places to Work in Community Colleges Award recognizes community and technical colleges with exceptional commitments to diversity through best-in-class student and staff recruitment and retention practices, and inclusive learning and working environments, and meaningful community service and engagement opportunities. We were selected upon the success of 4 items in particular: our Future Works Academy, which is a 2-semester leadership development program which is open to all full-time faculty, staff, and administrators; our mentoring program for new faculty; our Blinn Navigators program, in which faculty and staff serve as points of contact for students and direct them toward academic and student services and support resources; and for our wide array of faculty professional development opportunities. It should be noted, trustees, that this is not the first time that Blinn has won this particular distinguished award. We also won it in 2017. And finally, trustees, I'd like to provide you with an updated facilities report. On the Brenham campus, the building permit for the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Innovation building has been secured, and the site work has begun. Security fencing has been installed to secure the work site and to protect nearby trees besides Spencer Stadium. I also placed some pictures from yesterday on your computer location for you. The planning and design meetings for the P3 student housing project continue, and a student housing market study has been completed. Now, trustees, this study will be used by Servitas to seek bond monies for the project. This project will consist of 2 buildings housing 320 and respectively 184 beds. Due to uncertainties associated with the bond market, the 184-bed facility will be constructed first and completed by August 2021. The 320-bed facility is scheduled for occupancy in January 2022. Moving on to other facilities, the contract to install access control on the exterior doors of the Blinn College Park apartments has been awarded to Madison Construction, and the contractor is in the mobilization phase. This project is scheduled for completion in July. Now, moving to the Bryan campus, the cast stone replacement project is approximately 80% complete, and it remains on schedule for completion this June. And the contract to replace the roof on Building 2 has been awarded to Lessman Roofing and Sheet Metal, and the contractor is in the mobilization phase. This project is scheduled for completion in August. And the contract to maintain the existing parking lot and light poles on the Bryan campus has been awarded to Brazos Paving, and the contractor is in the mobilization phase, and the construction is scheduled to begin next month in May and will be completed by August. And finally, at the Rellis campus, the Agriculture and Workforce Education Complex. There, the painting, flooring, and fixtures are being installed in the office area, while electrical and plumbing trim out and painting are also almost complete in the workforce and ag building pavilions. Substantial completion of this facility is scheduled for very soon, May the 5th, and move-in is tentatively scheduled for mid-July. And finally, also at the Rellis Phase 2, the academic building contract has been completed and sent to the architect for execution. This project is scheduled for completion in fall 2022. And again, I have placed several recent pictures for your viewing at our computer location. With that, Trustee Mosier, I'll return the podium back to you, and thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cervantes, are you with us okay now?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. We're ready for the financial statement package for the period ending March 31.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the board would move to page 28 in their packet as the beginning of the presentation. And I'm going to go through this a little bit slower, Mr. Chairman, because I'm also trying to manage what the public is seeing too, so as well as you. So the next page of the presentation is the financial report. It shows where we are at this point in time. Our year-to-date is this report is through March, which is in the 7th month of the fiscal year, which brings us 58% of the way through. The next page is the revenue and expense. You can see the total revenue down the bottom is a little bit over $85 million. The expense is a little bit over $65 million. That brings us up to a net pretty close to around $20 million. The next page, page 31, is the statement of current operating changes. It's a comparison between the 2 years. The top part, you can see the revenue that we are up almost $2 million. Our expenditures are up also $1.46 million, almost $1.5 million. You look at the line right above that, you'll see the debt service, and it's a little bit less. That's a timing issue. We made our payment in April this year. Last year we made it in March. So we're going to talk about that as we go through the report. The net increase in fund balance, the bottom line is right now we show, through March, show a little bit over $500,000, but as I said, if you net that with the debt service, we're actually down about $800,000, which is pretty close to where we were in February. Next page is the revenue comparison by source, which is page 32. Not really much change there. All of those percentages are within 0.5% of where they were last year. The lone exception is the auxiliary sales and services. Part of that is attributed to the refund that some of the refund that we gave out in March, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. Next page, next slide is the tuition and fees revenue, actual versus budget. We had budgeted $71 million. The total net tuition and fees is 52, which brings us pretty close to around 73%. Last year we were a little bit higher. We were at 77.6%, but I would also be quick to point out that the current year's budgeted tuition and fees is about $6 million higher than what we had than last year's budget. Next slide is the tuition revenue, 2020 versus 2019. We're at $385,000 more. The district continues to be the largest portion of that, but offset by the increases in the waivers and exemptions and the allowances and the discounts. The next page or next slide is the fee revenue. And the fees are also up. The general fees are up total fees are up $1.1 million. The general fee is, again, the largest portion of that. Lab fees are also up. Workforce is down. Next slide is the housing and food service revenue, actual versus budget. We had budgeted a little bit over $11 million. Our revenue in these two areas is 8.5. It's 75.9%. Last year it was around 80. The refunds, Mr. Chairman, in housing, we had started that process in March, and we refunded $184,000 in housing. We refunded $215,000 in meals. We did not refund any of the parking because we had to work out some logistics of that. That has been completed. The parking portion has been completed in April, so you'll see that in next month's report. The estimates that we gave you were somewhere around $2.4 million. The actuals are coming in a little bit higher. We're trying to research what that is or why that is. Part of the reason is, even though I know they may be giving us two different things, maybe comparing apples to oranges. So we'll get that to you at the next month's report. The next slide is auxiliary services revenue. You can see $407,000 is the difference between this year and last year. Since we gave out pretty close to $400,000 in refunds, we were down already in auxiliaries, but that's a pretty good explanation for it. The next slide is the total expenses. The variance down at the bottom is $1.5 million. Again, this is partially attributed to the debt service. If we had that in there for this year, it would have been much greater. The very next slide is the fiscal year 2020 expense by category. You can see the salaries and wages are at 72%. That too would have been a little bit lower, closer to 70%, which is where we were last month, if the debt service had been, if we had paid for that in March. The very next slide is the expense comparison by category. It's $1.5 million increase, 2.3%. You can see on the left, the salaries and benefits are up compared to last year, which is understandable. We did give a 5% increase in pay, and then the debt service obviously attributed to the fact that we did make the payment in March. The next slide is page 41, operating expense comparison by function. We were up $3.3 million, 5.9%. Overall, the explanation is still the 5% increase in salary, but there were also increases in software and things of that sort. The very next slide, there's been a lot of questions. This shows the 2016 remaining bond projects on page 42. There's been some questions about this never-ending money. We are getting to the end of it, Mr. Chairman. You can see the Brenham Science Technology and the Blinn we've already hit a big portion of that. I've seen some cash flow projections. It looks like that money will be eaten up pretty quickly this summer. On the right in the purple, you see the Bryan Cast Stone. That project was expected to be completed early part of summer, so almost a little bit over $3 million of that 3.9 will go pretty quickly. Probably the only one that we've been holding back, we see how some of these locations worked out, was the Brenham Signage Monument. We may come back to the board if we're not able to complete that in time and redirect that money to other projects. I think we're on course to be able to use up all of the 2016 bond monies by the time allotted to us, which is to finish it up before next spring. Next slide is the student cash and refunds in March. We have brought in a little bit over $2.6 million. Student financial aid that we drew down is $1,257,000. We also received some payments of $2.6 million from students. We issued refunds of $1.2 million, and that $400,000, the auxiliaries that I talked about, refunds is also in that number. The next slide is the other cash receipts in March. We had received $2.6 million. Interest continues to come in on a monthly basis, $139,000. We didn't receive a state appropriation by design in January, so in February, but this came back in March. So we received our $2.3 million allotment. Our grants, contracts, and miscellaneous is also up $182,000. We didn't draw down any bond funds. The next slide is page 45, which is the use of cash in March. We used up $7.2 million. Most of that is payroll, as you would expect, $5.4 million, some in repair and renovations, and Servitas at a slight amount. The accounts payable is $1.5 million. We did check. We were in March. We were shut down for spring break, and we had some folks that obviously didn't go in there for pretty much all of March, but we still were able to maintain our accounts payable. We checked last year to see where we were at. It's pretty close to about the same thing, but our staff is attributing most of this to large payments that we made for contractors, but we are keeping up with our accounts payable at this point. The next slide shows the summary, which is the decrease in unrestricted cash and cash equivalents. The net cash that we received from students was $2.7 million. The cash received from other sources was also about the same, $2.7, but we used up $7.3 million to bring a net decrease to our cash in March. We were able to draw down some of our money from the investment pools and then use some of the money from the operating bank to be able to pay for that. The last slide is page 47, the unrestricted cash and cash equivalents. Right through at the end of March, it showed $101 million. Since we still have obviously at least a couple $1 million of refunds, and the activity will continue to pick up, I would expect that number to go below 100,000 by next month. But we still have our capital projects and deferred maintenance reserve continues to receive some money even from the investments, a little bit over $15 million. We have our 5-month reserve of $42.5. So we still have, at least at this juncture, an available unrestricted cash balance of a little bit over $43 million. Very strong position, Mr. Chairman. And that concludes the financial presentation. I'll be happy to respond to any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have questions for Mr. Savanes?
Richard, Mr. Chairman, this is Crossan.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Cervantes. Another good report, very well spoken as far as explaining everything. But, you know, I'm going to ask you about parking real quick, Mr. Cervantes. What's the situation at Relis in terms of, are those students getting refunds from A&M, or what is A&M doing in terms of parking? Just wondering.
You know, Dr. Krausen, that's a good question, and I've heard others ask it. I don't know that I've heard the answer yet. Maybe Mrs. Buck, she's in a little bit tighter than at A&M. Mrs. Buck, have you heard anything on refunds for A&M?
Mr. Cervantes, I've only heard about housing and meal plans, so I have not heard anything about parking. Dr. Basicki, have you heard anything on parking at A&M and Relis?
I have not.
We can follow up on that.
Yes.
I was just wondering. It's not that big a deal, but thank you.
Mr. Cervantes, I guess the question, with all the, do we know yet or have any sense of what? I mean, do we from our cash financial status? I think we all saw the release from Senator Cornyn about the money that's coming forward. But do we know? I mean, are we going to be confronted with I mean, do we anticipate that enrollment and everything is going to maintain whatever goals or guidelines we had set, or whatever projections we had set for that? And also, I happened to hear a conversation with Senator Colcourse yesterday, and I know that, I mean, it's clear that the state is going to be in some real financial binds over the next couple of sessions, and you know, I'm sure we're going to be doing well just to try to maintain the level of reimbursement from the state, or funding from the state that we've able to get, and so I guess are we making any plan? Is there thought processes going into where we're maybe headed over the next year or so financially, from a revenue standpoint, and more importantly, just in this next year, are we? You know, we've kind of set our budget on in anticipation that do we still think we can hit the numbers and so forth?
Mr. Chairman, that's a mouthful. So there's a bunch of questions in there, but let me start with enrollment. So we don't know what's going to happen in the fall. There is some early indications of enrollment that we're going to continue to track. The summer enrollment would be a good one for us to see how that's going. I look at our May mini-semester. I don't know that that's the best baseline for us, but right now it's up compared to last year. That one typically has been the distance ed program anyways. I think June may be a better determination for us. So nobody knows. It kind of depends on what's going to happen. I would think it depends a lot on what's going to happen in the fall and how we deliver the instruction. I would say this and tell the board, in all the years that I've been associated or been in higher education my entire career, I've seen some ups and downs that have occurred through a lot of these cycles. Nothing like this one, but when it happens, especially with the high unemployment, there is a tendency for people to go back and get re-educated. So to a certain extent, we are somewhat insulated. We are running some models of what it would look like in the event that it doesn't work out as rosy as we would hope it would be, and we will present those to the board as we move forward in our budget. The second thing that I would say from the, and I want to add one more thing on that. I do believe, or I met with business officers yesterday from around the state, and one of the comments that was made, and I absolutely agree with it, is while the fall may appear to be, we may take some hits in the fall, we'll see how that works out. But the spring is a lot, as people start moving forward we all believe that there's a tendency for the students to absolutely want to come back to the campuses. So I see spring has a higher likelihood, but we don't know that. The next part that I'd say is on the federal government is offering some aid to us right now. There's some installation. $7 million, of course, was the first allotment was going to go to students. We're beginning to figure out how we're going to do that. We're putting a plan together. But the remaining portion of it was to help schools out. So I think some of the money that we talked about for the refunds, although we haven't received the guidance from the Department of Education yet, but we believe that some of that money will be available to reimburse ourselves and maybe even to insulate us in the event that enrollment doesn't quite turn out the way that we hope that it will. And then the last thing, Mr. Chairman, is on the appropriations. I haven't projected any decreases in appropriations, but that's always something that could happen from the state's perspective. I've heard some discussion about asking because this is going to be a base year for funding, that there's already some institutions, colleges, and universities that are approaching the state and asking them if we can do that a little bit differently than what we normally do. So that's my answer to that, Mr. Chairman. I hope that answered your questions.
Well, it did. I mean, you got y'all are thinking about it. We're figuring out what direction to take. So that's good, because I think there's going to be some tougher, leaner times here even if it's in the short term, that we need to be concerned about. So, yeah.
Mr. Mosher.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mosher, this is Mary Hensley. I'd like to ask Leighton to come on, and if we could provide you just a tad bit more information that I think the trustees may find of interest.
All right.
Leighton and I are on numerous calls daily to TAC, to the Department of Education, to the coordinating board, and others. And Leighton, please correct me if I mistake anything, but this is our latest understanding. In regards to Senator Cornyn's announcement, Blinn will receive a little over $14 million. The first distribution is about half of that, slightly over $7 million. That distribution is literally pass-through money that will be moved through Blinn directly to the students. Which students are those? They are the students that were enrolled in Blinn during this spring semester during the time of the COVID-19 event. We have received little guidance up to this point, but we anticipate that the Department of Ed out of Washington, D.C. will send some initial guidelines towards Friday of this week or into the following week. Once we receive that information, then we will begin to have a clearer picture of how we will distribute to the students directly the slightly over $7 million. It is our current understanding that that $7 million will be expended to the students between now and August. Subsequently, then, we should receive the other half of the appropriated $14 million. It's our current understanding that that $7 million approximately is, as Mr. Cervantes said, to directly reimburse Blinn, the college, the institution, for the losses that occurred or the impact that occurred during this pandemic. I think it's important for the board to know a couple of things then. The first distribution will flow through directly to the students, not to Blinn College and the institutional funds. The second distribution will come to Blinn, and it will be to offset some of our losses and impact from the event. Third, I think the board should anticipate a loss of enrollment. I think all of the colleges are concerned about that. And it is typically true that when there is a downturn in the economy, the institution's enrollment across the state in higher education go up. In other words, a lot of people return to school for training and retraining and to complete their degrees. And so that could be the case. However, because this is so massive and has impacted so many people economically, I think the prudent thing for the college and the trustees to do is to plan for a loss of enrollment in the fall and likely in the spring. Now, how much that will be, we do not know yet, but we are gauging those numbers daily. I'd particularly like to thank Vice Chancellor Karen Buck. She and her team have done an amazing job of literally calling students daily to inquire about their current status and also their future desire to come back to Blinn College. Right now, for May mini-semester, our distance learning education numbers are up as compared to last year, but our overall numbers are down because of the loss of face-to-face. We are monitoring that very, very carefully. Leighton, could you please come on the phone and fill in any blanks and correct anything if that's not your current understanding?
Thank you, Dr. Angeli. Trustees, that is a great summary of that. I will follow up a little bit on the additional $7 million that will be coming in the future. We do not have any guidance at this time on the timing of that distribution. This is the money that will be eventually coming back to the college. There's been no guidance from the Department of Education on timing or use of those funds. Their focus was the direct student aid to students first. And now they're going to be starting to work on the rest of it. We'll keep you updated on that as soon as we hear anything, but the Department of Education has not released any guidance at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, any other questions regarding the financials discussion with Mr. Cervantes and Dr. Hensley? All right, that brings us to item C, which is an update on the Blinn-Brenham Housing Public-Private Partnership. And Mr. Cervantes, you're going to lead that discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. I would move you to page 50, which is the beginning of the P3 Phase 2 update. And I'll try to speed this up to leave a little time for questions, Mr. Chairman. At the January board meeting, the board authorized the administration to negotiate and execute an agreement with Servitas, but they also requested a periodic update, which is what we're trying to do today. I wanted the board to know that Blinn employees from accounting, planning, student services, and legal have continued to meet twice a week with Servitas. We also include on that call NCCD, the owners, general contractors, architects, engineers, lawyers, and underwriters of the project. And we focus on two particular areas, the finance meeting, which is on Wednesday morning, and the design is on Thursday mornings. The next page is the view from Prairie Lea. Wanted to show you what this looks like. You can see the technology building on the left. The building on the right is the larger of the two buildings. As Dr. Hensley suggested, there will be 324 beds in that one, and the building B will hold 180. Both buildings will be 4 stories high. Dr. Hensley did also mention that the pandemic has altered the potential financing and timing of the project, the construction. The bond market has been erratic. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the schedule. The next slide is the view from the east, which is the back. You can see the two buildings. They're both facing the east, and the parking lot will be across the street. And the very next slide talks about the Scion survey. So the survey is not yet complete. It was expected to be due in May, but they did give us some preliminary information. There were 250 respondents. They all were from Brenham. We focused on them. They were not exclusively for those that were in housing, but all of Brenham. And they came out very favorably. 80% of the respondents said that they viewed the price points favorably. That's good from our perspective. 92% said if they had that unit available to them at that price, they may have selected it in August. They did show a large percentage of them like the single occupancy units, and 19% preferred the double occupancy. There was a change in the design. The students also in that survey suggested that a community kitchen would be of some value, and that has been added to the design. Scion, the approach was also that they did speak specifically with stakeholders from the campus. Next slide is the site plan. I wanted to show this. The site provides a look at the parking surrounding the facility. On the far right, you'll see 103 spaces on the back lot. In the interior, see 112 that are adjacent to the facility. Interesting enough, as I asked people to look at what Mill Creek had, that's pretty close to the same amount. The project will use another 88 parking spaces from the campus's existing inventory that will be used to satisfy the city's requirement. We fully expect you see the parking lot across the street, which is where the 5th Street, where the athletics field is, and we fully expect that students will use that too. We provided that space, and we'll be redoing that space for the science building. There may be some events in the science building that require us to cone off this area. The students won't be able to park there for a short period of time, but I expect they will gravitate there. The other part you should know is in the science building, we have doubled the size of the parking, pretty close to doubling the size of the parking spaces that are adjacent to it. So I think we're going to be fine as far as parking. Next slide is the first floor of the building A, the larger building. I'll direct your attention to the left. You can see there's two study rooms that have been added in there. The conference room is going to be available mostly for employees, but that's also, I would think that students could use it at some point in time. You can see the kitchen also in blue. The kitchen is going to have the full refrigerator, stove, microwave, and dishwasher. The laundry room also in blue will have 10 washers and dryers. The commons room at the entrance, depicted in a cream color, is about 1,300 square feet, so a fairly large area. In the middle of the facility in green is an ADA suite. It will accommodate 4 beds. This is on the first floor. And then on the far right, you can see on the east side, depicted in the light gray, that is also a two beds in a suite, also ADA available. The yellow on the far right is the manager's suite, which will be complete with a kitchen. The first floor, I'm moving to that in Building B. The next slide, page 57. Same 2 study areas in blue, also stacked on the floors above it. ADA suite is in green, closer to the front, and then the common room in the cream color is a little bit smaller than what's in Building A, but still fairly large, 1,100 square feet. The laundry room is in the back of the offices this time. It's going to have a little bit less, six washers, 6 dryers. The ADA suite in the middle, depicted in light gray, in the corner there. And then a manager's suite depicted in yellow. The next slide are the upper floors. The upper floors, and this is the back to Building A. They added you still have the study rooms on the left, but in the middle they added a common space, and I think that's going to be pretty nice for a student. We haven't received the furniture sizing and what they're going to put in some of these things, so don't know exactly how many it's going to accommodate. The green is the ADA in the middle. That's a 4-bedroom. On the far right, this one is not specified. The light gray, it is a single, two beds, one in each room, but it is not specified for ADA. And all of these will be stacked on the other floors. So same layout. Next page is the upper floors for Building B. You see the same study areas that have been stacked from above or from below, and also we stacked from above. The green is the ADA, same setup, 4 beds in that area, and on the bottom right is a single 2-bed apartment, and then the next page shows the double occupancy. Because we've got some time to figure out exactly where things are going to go. In terms of furniture, one of the looks that they provided to us is the twin beds on both sides, but we've also seen bunk beds. Not sure whether or not they'll do some combination of those, but this is what we have at this juncture. Each student will have a desk. Each student will have their own closet. That's on both sides, and this is the double occupancy. They will share two sinks for the whole unit. They will also have one toilet, and there will be one shower in there. Next slide is the single occupancy, not near as many, but again, one bed in each room, one desk, a closet for both of them, and they will share a toilet and the shower. The next slide is the legal agreements. We have completed the pre-development services agreement that was executed at the end of February. There still are other agreements that we have to manage. Our legal team is navigating their way through that. We hope to have that done certainly by the time we're closing. The next slide is the financing and construction schedule. I think what I'd like to say here that and you heard Dr. Hensley say it's already been impacted by the pandemic, but the schedules are still very highly dependent on the rates. They had originally planned on having somewhere close to a little bit over 4%, but then the market just went very erratic. In February, actually, it was close to 3%. Would have been nice if we could have closed then, but we did not. Right now, they're closer to 5%, but they are dropping. And so we hope by the time May comes around that we'll be in a better position. They will, according to the schedule, receive the ratings from Moody's and Standard & Poor's, I would presume. If you haven't been following that, higher education as a whole they've already dropped the view of us to a negative outlook, all of higher education. I would presume that would be the same here. There is a facility, not like ours, but at least it's a residential facility that by university that they are tracking that will go out and bid a little bit before ours, so we're going to be very interested in that one to see what that does. The bond purchase agreement is scheduled to be signed in May. We'll know then if we have any further delays if the numbers come in too high. We are scheduled to close on June 11th. And then the construction, if all goes well, we will have groundbreaking on July 6th. It'll be happy days. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to respond to any questions.
All right, trustees, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Douglas.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
A couple of questions. One that I just noticed in the drawings, one elevator. Is that sufficient? Is a question. And then my second question relates to the survey indicating that 61% prefers single occupancy, but it appears that the majority of the building of the rooms in those projects are double occupancy. So being that there was a preference at single occupancy, do you think that is something that may have to do with students wanting more privacy, and how that may impact the survey responses if they would have known that we're going to have limited single occupancy units?
Thank you, Mr. Bohart. Those are both questions. I'm going to have maybe either Mark or Mr. Feldhake or Mr. O'Malley respond to the elevator, but let me respond to the survey. Blinn had always had a position that, if we had we could have our cake and eat it too. A best case scenario, if we could do everything to give everything to students they wanted, we certainly would do it. In this particular case, we had a plan to get as many beds in this facility as we possibly could. Mostly, Mr. Bohart, because We knew we have some aging facilities. There's three out there right now that have 250 students, 250 beds. That and the privacy associated with those are obviously much less. Those are the group showers for all three of those facilities. So we are going to be providing a lot more privacy than anything that we've had in those three dorms. It's not ideal, but I would say this: the other thought that we had as we moved through this, the strategy was to make sure that we had a menu of opportunities that were available for students, whether it's pricing or whether it's choices, and I think we've continued to do that with this facility. Best if we could wave our magic wand and get everything, certainly that would be something to do, but provide all the privacy that we could for students. That comes with a price. They will have to pay a lot more, and we're trying to satisfy that piece of it too. So. Either Mark or Mr. O'Malley, could you respond to the elevator question?
Yes, Mr. Cervantes, this is Mark Feldhake. What I want to remind everyone is that we do have two buildings, so that is two elevators, and if you compare that to Mill Creek Hall, which is a singular building but with two elevators, we have a similar usage. So we believe that the two elevators in the two separate buildings should be sufficient.
Thanks, Mark.
Any other questions, Douglas?
No, sir.
Any other trustees have questions regarding the? I do think a general comment. I think we need to be a little proactive in explaining again. I know it's hard to, because it's a difficult. The private public thing is difficult to explain, but we need to keep trying to get that out in the community a little bit continuously, in the sense of and going forward right now with all the scare and talk with the virus going on and all that. There's just a lot of, it's typical kind of comments, but we need to be prepared, or have some, maybe be sure we emphasize totally how this project is financed, how the financing is handled, and how it interacts with the college, but not that it's not on our books and it's not we're not signing the commitment on the payment. So I would encourage we do that also. So.
And Mr. Cervantes,
Yep.
This is Jim Cokhorst.
You bet.
Just had one question, and it's obvious that the financial picture's changed a bit, but just to clarify, initially we were thinking we were going to have both buildings under construction, but because of the new financial picture of the bond market, it looks like only one and the smaller of the two buildings would potentially be the first to be under construction, delaying the second building until the next semester.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cokhorst. That is true. The building B, the smaller building, is now slated to be completed first, and then which would be for the fall of 2021. The second building is still slated to be completed that fall too, but it will be in the middle of the semester, so that it would be available for opening in the spring of 2022.
So it's from a construction standpoint, ingress, egress, that type of thing, while that other building is under construction, we feel like it'd be habitable to be in that first building while the other one is still being under construction. I'm assuming the construction company has given us those assurances.
We have spoken about that, Mr. Cokhorst, and I think what we're comfortable with is by the time the first facility, Building B, is opened, the majority of the work will be inside for Building A. And so we don't see it as being as a problem for our students, but we're certainly very cognizant of that, and we'll do everything we can to ensure that they're not impeded by that construction.
Okay, well, that clears things up. So both buildings will actually be under construction. Just one will be completed by that time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Along that line, Trustee Colcors, I know Dr. Hensley's tired of me bringing this up, but I think we're going to have that. The science building is going to be under construction. These buildings are going to be under construction, and all that's going to be centered around the intersection of Prairie Lea and 5th Street. And I'm hoping, Mr. Cervantes, that O'Malley and Mark we need to really work with the city in trying to be sure that we don't clog up that street out there. That Prairie Lea is a very busy street. It's actually an FM highway 389. There are a lot of people use that, and we need to plan ahead about that and try to do the best we can to keep that street where it's, where we don't stop up traffic.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We have been working very closely with the city. They're very much aware of the project and how it will impact the traffic, and we're going to continue to work with them to make sure that we don't have the problems that you have suggested.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the P3 project?
Mr. Chairman, this is Douglas again.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I had one other thing that I have a question for. On the P3 detention, is detention going to be underground on 5th Street, or has that been resolved?
Mr. Bohart, and I may not be the best person to respond to this, but as I understand it, the last that I had heard about that, has been a while since we discussed it, that detention was going to be underneath the parking lot on the east side of the building. Is that, and Richard, if that's not correct, can you come on and verify?
Yes, sir. Yes, the detention will be underground, Mr. Bohart. I'm not sure the exact location, but that's been coordinated with the city, both from the detention standpoint and from the outfall standpoint down to the city's storm sewer system.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead now. We'll move to the consent agenda. These items all are considered in one motion. They've been made available. They're aware of them, and if there is any separate discussion, we'll pull that item from there. But otherwise, we'll approve all these items. There's quite a lengthy number of amendments, changes to the policy. So, do I hear a motion that we approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is that Mr. Wells?
Yes, sir.
Jim Colcors, second.
Jim Colcors, second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Let me go down my list here. Reverend Wells, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bohart?
Yes.
Mrs. Bame?
Yes.
Dr. Krausen?
Yes.
Trustee Colcors?
Yes.
And Trustee Mosier votes yes. Thank you. Let's go now to our discussion and possible action items. Item A is the authorization for the administration to negotiate and execute a contract for the replacement of the boiler in the student center and the Blinn Bryan campus. Mr. Cervantes, you got the floor on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. I'm going to ask Mr. Feldhake if he would make the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cervantes. Chairman Mosier, Dr. Hensley, and members of the board, I'm here with you today to present this agenda item requesting that you authorize administration to negotiate and execute a contract for boiler replacement at the Student Center on the Bryan campus. Those boilers in the Student Center are at the end of their lifespan, and so administration contracted with Swoboda Engineering to design a replacement project. We then solicited proposals from state cooperative contract vendors who perform that work, and they provided us with quotes on the project. The quote that we would recommend is from American Mechanical Services of Houston. We've worked with them before. They've done good work for us. They provided us with the low quote of $167,900, and this amount is budgeted in the FY20 R&R budget. And with that, if there are any questions, I will be available.
Are there any questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion that we approve the recommendation.
This is Katie Bain. I move that we approve this recommendation.
We had a motion by Mrs. Bain. Do I have a second?
Jim Cocor seconds.
Okay, Jim, we got a second from Trustee Cocor. Any discussion on the motion? If not, I'll ask Reverend Wells your vote.
Aye.
Mr. Bohart?
Aye.
Mrs. Bain?
Aye.
Dr. Krausen?
Aye.
Cocor?
Aye.
Trustee Mosier votes aye. That brings us to item B, which is the authorization for the administration to negotiate and execute a contract for interior upgrades on building A and G on the Bryan campus. And again, Mr. Cervantes, this is under your, give you the floor.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I neglected to give the page to the board. Now we are on page 168. Mr. O'Malley will be making the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Cervantes. Mr. Mosier, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. This agenda item is for interior upgrades on buildings A and G on the Bryan campus. The college received bids on March 24th from 3 contractors, and the recommendation of the administration is to move forward with MBC Management of Navasota in the base bid amount of $389,554. I'm familiar with MBC Management. They come highly recommended. The college has not had an actual construction contract with them, but they are certainly recommended and can provide the services on this project. And again, this project will be funded from the fiscal year 20 R&R budget.
Any questions of Mr. O'Malley? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Krausen will move that we make the motion that we select MBC Management.
Is that Mr. Krausen?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Krausen makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Trustee Wells second. Trustee Wells seconds.
Okay, thank you, Randy. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, let me take a poll. Reverend Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Bohart?
Aye.
Mrs. Bain?
Aye.
Dr. Krausen?
Aye.
Mr. Cocor?
Aye.
And Trustee Mosier votes aye. That brings us to the item C, which is the authorization for the administration to negotiate and execute a contract for the district bank depository services. Mr. Cervantes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board.
Mr. Chairman,
in February,
Mr. Chairman, this is Douglas. I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. But I need to disclose that I will not participate in any discussion nor vote on this matter due to my advisory board and consulting role with one of the bidders for the depository services. I felt I needed to get that out early on.
Very good. All right, sir. We will take that and keep that on the record then. Okay, go ahead, Richard.
Yes, sir. So in February, the board approved the administration's request to solicit proposals for depository services, which is required under Section 51003 of the Education Code. The current contract was set to expire in August 31st, 2020. The administration issued the RFP before spring break, and we received 2 bids back for services. The administration is recommending the bid be awarded to Brenham National Bank. The term of the contract will be a base 5 years plus 5 one-year options to renew. And I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions of Mr. Cervantes regarding the bank depository bid contract? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we give the administration the ability to negotiate a contract with Brenham National Bank for bank depository services. This is Jim Kokhorst.
Okay, motion by Mr. Kokhorst. Do I have a second?
This is Tanny Bame, and I second that motion.
I have a second from Mrs. Bain. Any discussion on the motion? Let me take a vote. Mr. Wells? Reverend Wells?
We lost him.
Yeah. Mr. Bohart abstains from participation and vote. Mrs. Bain?
I vote aye.
Dr. Krausen?
Aye.
Trustee Kokhorst?
Aye.
And Trustee Mosier votes aye. Let me go back. Randy? We must have lost him. I don't know. What do you think? What should we do about that, Layton?
Mr. Mosier, this is Leighton Schubert. It looks like he might have just logged back in.
I just did. I got disconnected.
Oh, okay. Randy, we're taking a vote on the depository that's been recommended. Okay, thank you, but thank you. All right, that takes care of that item. That brings us to number D, the authorization for the administration to negotiate and execute a contract for the audit of the areas identified in the district-wide risk assessment report. Mr. Cervantes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. We're on the last item. It's on page 174. Last summer, the college contracted with Weaver Tidwell to conduct a risk assessment review. In December, Weaver presented their findings and a recommendation to the members of the Budget Audit Investment and Finance Committee. They also recommended in particular, recommended a 3-year audit plan. The committee asked to have a summary of the report provided to the full board, which Weaver did, and the administration provided the presentation to the full board in January. At the same meeting in January, the administration sought and received approval from the board to issue an RFP for professional services to complete the 3-year audit plan. Blinn received qualification packages from 3 firms for their services, and one of those was Weaver Tidwell. The administration is now seeking board approval to negotiate and execute a contract with Weaver Tidwell to audit the areas identified in the district-wide risk assessment report. That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any questions? I want to ask, on the areas that are identified, and there were, what were the 3, are there 3 items in the initial recommendation, or the first contract or first work for this group, Richard, or is that, how is that established, what they're going to do first or second or third?
So, Mr. Chairman, I do not have the list in front of me, but just to, there were roughly around 51 items that were looked at in the risk assessment, and they narrowed it down to taking a portion of them in 3-year increments. And I don't have those in front of me. I can get that to the board if they need that. But right now, here's what we're asking is we go in and we negotiate with the Weaver Tidwell, get a contract, which may or may not, at least at that juncture, have to specify which particular items we're going to look at. Quite frankly, I think it would be good for us to look at that again, given in light of this pandemic, to see if there's something else that pops out that might be more important to us. So I think we could come back to the board at a later date if needed and say, here's the ones that we've selected to do first. We have a budget audit investment finance committee in May. That would be a good opportunity to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Which brings me to the question is, or the other question or concern, does the board, I think it's important that the board have some kind of input into that selection, you know, what they're doing, what their work assignments for that investigate, their review, or whatever you want to call it, audit, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But I mean, is that part of the process, or how is that? I know they did this. We had that chart with all those diagrams on there, but can the board have some input into where they prioritize their work?
Mr. Chairman, there's been at least a committee meeting and then a full board meeting. And we, as I said, I think we have another opportunity to have the BAIF come in and if there's anything that comes from the board, maybe to flow through them. There's opportunity to do that if that's what the board so chooses, Mr. Chairman.
I think it'd be good to have in an audit committee, or the budget audit investment committee ought to be a good place for that to work. But we'll talk some more about that if that's. I think we need to do that.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mosier, this is Leighton Schubert.
Yes, sir.
I've got the proposed plan for the 2020 list, if you'd like me to read that to you.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay. So the 2020 proposed audit plan had 3 planned new audits. It was in information technology services. The second one was facilities and maintenance. And the third one was student accounting. They also planned what they call audit consulting, which is not a full audit, but is a mini audit, if you will, of certain areas. And they suggested 2 items, business continuity planning, and then environmental health and safety was the lineup for the 2020 proposed plan.
Well, that sounds good. I mean, I don't know what.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is Douglas.
Yes, sir.
I think what Mr. Cervantes was talking about having the committee review, because at the time when that was presented to us, we then submitted it to the board, and it was a very, I guess you could say, rushed situation with overheads and things of that nature. And I think there might be some things that at least I, as a board member individually, may want to talk about, maybe changing the order of what is their original proposal was. And I think Mr. Cervantes indicated that probably would be a good approach to do. And I would be hesitant to want to approve this based upon a predetermined schedule, which we really don't have in front of us now, and then also in light of what is, I guess you could say, a change in our world.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bohart, what we are requesting today is authorization to negotiate and execute a contract, and we left it flexible enough to not tie us into a particular priority, so that if the board wants to provide some input, we still have some opportunity to do that. It does not constrain us, is what I was trying to get across.
Right. I think we can take that up at that committee meeting in May. If that would, I think we can assign that to them and they can then bring that back to the board or recommend to the board maybe the areas. So let's go forward on that, Mr. Mr. Cervantes, if you would, and let's try to review that at that budget meeting, or at
Yep.
that investment meeting.
Yes.
All right, I'm sorry, I lost myself here. Did we vote on that or not?
We have not voted yet.
Voted on it.
I guess we don't even have a motion at this point. Do I hear a motion to authorize the administration to negotiate and execute a contract for the audit of the areas identified in the district-wide risk assessment report?
Jim Kokorst moves.
Okay. We have a motion from Trustee Kokorst. Do I have a second?
This is Patty, and I second motion.
Trustee Bain seconds that motion. Any discussion? Any more discussion? Let me take a vote. Reverend Wells?
Aye.
Trustee Bohart?
Aye.
Trustee Bain?
Aye.
Trustee Krausen?
Aye.
Trustee Kokorst?
Aye.
And Trustee Mosier votes aye. I believe that concludes our agenda for the morning. Dr. Isley or Layden, anything else that I didn't skip over anything? Did we?
No, sir, you're great. Thank you.
Trustees, I really, it's going to be my goal here to try to get us together in some little bit better fashion of some sort, either by, it's where we do have a few items that it's just that time of the year where we're going to be needing to take some action regarding the reviews of the board and so forth, and we need to do that, and it obviously would be good to do it collectively where we were together, but if not, I'm going to have to sit down with Dr. Hensley and Layden and see if we can come up with a way to handle some of that. But we're going to need to be doing that, and we have some items that I know that have been brought up previously that are going to need to be discussed in an executive session, and we're going to need to be looking to do that within the next month or so. And so we're going to see how this plays out here in the next couple of weeks, and whether the situation becomes more agreeable to us meeting together or not. And if not, we'll just have to come up with another way of doing it. So again, I appreciate it very much. Hope everyone's doing well and everybody's staying healthy, and let's hope that we can get back to I tell you, this economy is going to be something to deal with too in the next few months or a year. So
Going to be a challenge. Yep.
It really is. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much. I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn.
Jim Kokorst moves adjournment.
Thank you, Jim. We have a second to that?
Patty Bain seconds.
Second it.
Okay, we got a couple of seconds in there, and I'll let Laurie figure out which one it was there. So, all right, I'll agree. I'll say aye. We'll just adjourn this thing. Thank you all.
Aye.
All right. Unanimous vote. Thanks so much. See you all in a bit.
Thank you, Charles.